So my favourite moment of 2018 was when Encryption won the Danehill Stakes at Flemington.
Ready to run for the Danehill. Gates are back and they're racing towards the inside spin, away only fairly.
I was lucky enough to be there that day, so it was good to see Godolphin get a Group 2 win.
In the context of what I do in Australia as racing and bloodstock manager, producing the really important colt prospect is obviously a key driver of what we're striving to achieve down here. And there's two horses in 2018 that I think we took a great deal of satisfaction from their success.
He drew one which wasn't very good, I remember, and he had to come out and he had to go back. And Williams kind of sat on him for a little bit, got the outside rail and kind of shot through out of nowhere.
Night Vacillator and Sanctimonious as they reach the 300 metres.
If you watch the race, he should have been knocked over and could have been knocked over half a dozen times in running. And it was a dominant victory.
Encryption runs on, Native Soldier with 100 to go with Tavasan, Thorondor, then Encryption. It's Thorondor taking the lead. Encryption's getting out and flashing over the top. Encryption has got up to beat Thorondor.
And I think the racing team done a fantastic job. They put the blinkers on for the first time to get him to concentrate, and he just went through a minute gap and just bolted through there and just won the Danehill, which is a very prestigious race, and obviously from a stallion point of view, it's important to get that run on the board.
In terms of significance for our operation, is obviously by our champion sire in Lonhro, out of our champion mare, first foal of four-time Group 1 winner Guelph, who was just an outstanding mare for Sheikh Mohammed in this country.
I think we've bred the best to the best, expected the best, and have got the best. This horse, very exciting, beautifully bred, with electric acceleration, and we certainly haven't seen his best yet.
In the same sort of mould, 2-year-old colt Tassor, who obviously is by our first season sire Brazen Bow, and from one of our best mares in Essaouira, making him a half-brother to both Astern and Alizé, to win by 5 lengths on debut in one of the more impressive 2-year-old performances we can remember seeing for a colt with his pedigree, his looks and his prospects.
Obviously everyone's hopes are high for a horse of his breeding and calibre.
It was only a small field. I think 6 horses accepted, and by the time scratchings came around there were only 4 left in it.
We're all set now and they're racing. Jonah's going to settle last and Space Boy given a real dig out of the gates to lead.
There were horses there that were flying in their track work at home. A horse like Space Boy had won a trial by a long way and had lit up the turf in a gallop here at Warwick Farm on a Tuesday morning. Gary Portelli knows what it takes to train a 2-year-old, and with Space Boy he was very, very confident that he had a slipper candidate.
On Cardiff the outside, the race favourite, then Tassort.
And the horse had a wonderful experience barging his way into the clear at the 250 metre mark, and his last furlong was very, very impressive. It felt as good to James as it looked visually.
Jonah getting to the outside, 350 out, Space Boy asked to kick and does so. Space Boy in front, Tassort is pushing off the fence now. It barged its way into the clear. Tassort joins Space Boy now, and Tassort starts to draw clear from Space Boy, who's all out now. Jonah running on, but Tassort, great debut. Tassort rips away to win it. Space Boy just clung on to second, a half head in front of Jonah.
Given his pedigree and given his sire, look, I don't think it came to huge surprise that he won, but the way he did it was what set him apart from the other 2-year-olds that have raced this season.
More importantly, I think evidently it's forced people to sit up and take notice of Tassort as a colt and as a 2-year-old to be reckoned with for the Autumn Carnival.
The exciting thing about him is there's no real view yet as to where his ceiling might be. So those sort of colts of that significance for our operation, they cannot be overstated.
So when Avilius arrived in the stable a few days, I think it was, before the Bart Cummings, there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement around him. He'd shown in Sydney that he was a genuine Melbourne Cup contender if we could get him qualified. And we all knew that James, wanted to get him qualified on this run so that we didn't have to mess around with his preparation to run him again. So the Bart Cummings Stakes, there was a lot of pressure going into the race.
They're set for the Bart Cummings. 2,500 metres, they're ready, gates are back and racing.
Lined up as favourite in the 2,500 metre race, the furthest he'd ever actually performed over, and never even won over a mile and a half overseas. But we had him there, fourth up from a spell, and the horse was, from an inside barrier, settled down worse in midfield. He was about seventh at the half mile. But as soon as Glyn just asked him for a little bit of an effort turning for home, he was straight onto the bridle for him, picking up runs between runners. And Glyn was a little nervous that he'd actually couldn't hold him any longer once he kept surging. By about the 350, he sort of had to nearly hit the front.
There's a wall lining up. Jarmay's running on. Avilius now down the outside with Bonjamas as they reach the 250. Avilius lets down.
And it was a long way from home by the furlong to be claiming the lead. The horse had just about felt like his job was done and was beginning to clock off. And that was when the Shadwell horse, Jarmay, started ranging up on his inside.
Jarmay trying to go with it from Northwest Passage, then Bonjamas. It's Avilius at the 150 just in front. Jarmay driving at it. It's Avilius just in front of Jarmay. Yogi's flashing home. It's a big finish. They hit it. Avilius has just won.
Jarmay had a wonderful record at 2,500 metres at Flemington. I think in 2 starts there he'd never been beaten. As a horse of His Highness Sheikh Hamdan, that the family were really going at it hammer and tong for the last furlong. Glyn was able to get a little more out of Avilius, and I think our horse had a little bit more left in reserve, and he was able to get up on the line. But there was a protest lodged against us from Michael Walker, who rode Jarmay on the day. So there was a Shadwell horse protesting against a Godolphin horse.
It led into a sort of steward's inquiry that lasted for a lot longer than I'd hoped it would. It lasted for about 15 minutes, but luckily we came away with the race, and it was our golden ticket into the Melbourne Cup.
And it was an emotional win for us, race named in honour of my grandfather. And whilst we always try to keep sentiment out of business, it was a little hard on that occasion because, that Group 3 was probably my most prized Group 3 victory of all time, but that wasn't before we had to try and hold on to the race in the steward's room.
That was the start of a very anxious and nervous 6 weeks for us all in the stable here, just making sure that Avilius was cared for and looked after as best as we possibly could, so that his preparation as it turned out, into the Cox Plate and then onto the Melbourne Cup was seamless.
It was a really important one for the team because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to bypass one race in favour of the exemption race, and we got up with him there and proved that he could run a mile and a half strongly enough, stepped out 500 metres in distance to do so, and got his ticket into the Melbourne Cup.